The graphic artist Jan Richardson painted layers of gold paint on strips of paper, one layer after another. And then after they were dry, she covered the gold entirely with gray. When the gray was just dry enough, she took sandpaper to it. All through the painting, the drying, the sanding, watching the gold emerge from the gray, she was thinking about John the Baptist, who now sits in prison. This is the John of whom we read in chapter 1 of Luke's Gospel, where his mother Elizabeth says to her kinswoman Mary, "As soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leapt for joy." Luke means us to see that even in his mother's womb, John is able to discern and recognize the one for whom the world has longed. It's a far different enclosure that John finds himself in now, and he will not emerge from this one into life as when he left the safe confines of his mother's womb. And yet, even here, John's powers of discernment are at full force. This one, whom Jesus calls a messenger, is still receiving messages. And clothed within his cell, he's still keeping his ears and his eyes open. When John heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, Matthew writes, how the word permeates even the prison walls, shines forth even through the prison bars, illuminates the darkest cell. In the fourth gospel, Jesus is the light shining in the darkness, and John is often described like the moon, with borrowed light giving witness to the sun. Christmas, of course, is celebrated at the time of the winter solstice, the longest night and the shortest day of the year. Day and night are not separate realities, but they move in tandem with each other. In the book of Genesis, when God was first creating, separating the light from the darkness, God didn't call it good. It was only at the close of the day, evening came and morning followed the first day, that God then calls it good. Separating them is apparently not good. Richard Rohr says that John the Baptist is only a first stage of life prophet. He had the freedom, the passion, and the clear boundaries that are needed to get anything started. But Jesus goes on to say, after praising John so profusely, that the very least in the kingdom of God is greater than John the Baptist. Yes, John is a wild man who clears the threshing floor, but after that, he really doesn't have that much to do. It takes a second stage of life man, like Jesus, to know how to make food out of the seed that has been winnowed, and how to heal and use the chaff that John has no patience with. Rather than the absolute certainties that John is looking for, Jesus answers with questions. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? Jesus' questions reposition us. They expose our unconscious biases. They break us out of our dualistic mind. Jesus leaves us in between, where God and grace can get at us, and where we are not at all in control. The German poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote in his letter to a young poet, "I want to ask you to bear with patience all that is unresolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves, for everything must be lived. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday, you will gradually, without noticing, live into the answer. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk from the Abbey of Gethsemani, died 51 years ago on Tuesday, December the 10th. Merton's famous spiritual biography, The Seven-Story Mountain, is the modern sequel to Augustine's conversion story 16 centuries ago. Like John the Baptist in prison, Merton used his social isolation within the monastery on the margins of society to critique the injustices of his time: racism, nuclear armament, poverty. In October of 1968, near the end of his life, Merton concluded a talk to a group of monks in Calcutta with these now famous lines: "My dear brothers, we are already one, but we imagine that we are not. And what we have to recover is our original unity. What we have to be is what we are." Always a seeker, Merton lived his contradictions: the person in motion who seeks stillness, the monk who wants to belong to the world, the famous person who wants to be unknown. Listen to this reflection. It's often called the Merton Prayer. It's an excellent guide for these final days of our Advent journey. My Lord and my God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think that I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I know nothing about it. Therefore, will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone.